Hey folks, welcome to the DarkHorse Podcast Livestream Q&A number 151. We got a lot of questions to answer as a result of prior Q&As that could not or did not happen.
That's right.
So we should get to it.
All right, let's get to it. We got 3 from Discord. We're going to start with the one from 2 weeks ago, go in reverse chronological order before hitting the questions that you guys can ask live at darkhorsesubmissions.com. First question from the Discord this week, which you can access at either of our Patreons. Many people are considering homeschooling their children to protect them from the excesses of woke ideology, but this comes with its own challenges, of course. Could you talk about the possible dangers or drawbacks of homeschooling? So I will say that we used to have a lot of students at Evergreen who had been homeschooled, and they were among the most innovative, creative, and rigorous thinkers that we had. Not to say that we didn't have plenty of extraordinary thinkers among the schooled, but we also had unschooled students. But Evergreen did not attract the traditional, sort of like the Christian traditional homeschooler types, of which there is a sort, and I can't speak to what effect that might have on the developing mind and personality of those so schooled. But the homeschooled students that we got were really remarkable. And therefore, the big consideration that I had and heard, both from other parents of young children when we had very young children, and from talking to those students about what they had learned, was considerations for the parents' time, whether or not they have the personality, they have the skill set, they don't have the paid work that they have to be doing, etc., and then the socialization for the children, some sort of a homeschooling, as a lot of people discovered and created during COVID. Actually, we're going to make a pod and do 5 families, for instance, which is still not the same kind of possibility for socialization as you would get in a big school. On the other hand, it much more closely approximates what you might have gotten in earlier human history. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I would add that one danger is that it appears that math is often not well taught at home, which I take to be the result of often parents don't quite have it down, and so they're not in a good position to teach, which is not to say that math teachers are going to be competent at a level, and it's going to be rare that they're capable of dealing with somebody who has unusually high capacity. But anyway, it is one thing that one should think carefully about, because those students, as good as they were often
deficient in math.
Yep.
No, I think that's right. I think it's more likely that parents who are inclined to homeschool will have talents that don't tend towards the mathematical. That if there's one parent in a parenting unit who has those tendencies, they are probably more likely to be the one who's earning the money that allows the other one to not be working outside the home, for instance. Whereas I had a parent who was excellent at teaching me math and taught me much more than I was learning from any of the teachers who I had who didn't know very much about math. I think that's very rare. But I will just repeat your concern, which is that it's the very rare math teacher who knows what they're doing. So it's perhaps the rarer homeschooling parent who does know what they're doing, mathematically speaking, but it's also, unfortunately, the rare math teacher.
I would say likely to be the case. Math is difficult to teach well, and because of that, it's harder for a math teacher to do it well. So what a math teacher will do may be above what somebody trying to cobble together a curriculum of their own will do. And cobbling together a curriculum probably means getting a curriculum from somewhere, which means not really understanding or probably even remembering how some of these things are done. So anyway, there's a special hazard, and there might be some remedy. I mean, there is a lot of cool stuff available online. I've pointed to Vi Hart before. I'm very fond of the way she describes mathematical principles in intuitive ways. Obviously Khan Academy and other things provide resources, but I think thinking very deliberately about math is probably a good idea.
A lot more to be said. I can't remember actually if Our book, Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, originally had 2 chapters on education, and in crunching it down to 1 and in losing a whole bunch of other stuff, I think maybe the bit that we did on homeschooling got erased. So I'm not sure how much we have actually put out into the universe on this topic, but
Yep.
But certainly given what is true of so many of the schools now, it is a choice that a lot of very smart people are making.
Yep.
Second question from the Discord this week. Canada is set to allow medical assistance in dying, MAID, for individuals suffering from mental illness. Plus, doctors in Canada are being told that they should suggest MAID to eligible patients before the patient brings it up. Thoughts? It's 2 very different questions,
Yep.
right? Or it's 2 very different policies.
I believe this falls under the heading of what could possibly go right.
With regard to the second.
Nope.
Okay.
I would say I am not arguing that there is no abstract case to be made for instances. The problem is once you create the category, it's a little like the death penalty, right? There are cases in which the death penalty makes sense. The problem is, in order for the death penalty to be applied in those cases, you have to have the death penalty, and then the death penalty gets used in all kinds of cases where it doesn't make sense,
Right.
and in fact, you end up putting innocent people to death.
Right.
So the problem is, if you create...
And being opposed to the death penalty doesn't mean that you think that there is no crime that doesn't necessarily warrant the
Right.
punishment.
There are crimes for which it's the right punishment. The problem is there's no mechanism that's sufficiently careful that can be trusted with deciding when you've got such a case.
Right.
And the same thing can be said here. Certainly there are people with a very valid argument, just as there are people with a very valid argument against abortion, right? That is to say, a logically consistent argument about the reason that it should never be available. I don't think they are right.
Yeah.
But there will be people who make the same kind of argument here, which is that this is not for humans to decide. And I think the fact that those people will typically be very much a minority tells us the answer, that actually we have to decide. But in this case, there's no mechanism to do it. This will be abused. That means people will be put to death who were coerced. And
So again, though, there's 2 different things. So medical assistance in dying for people suffering from mental illness is what I
Right.
thought you were talking about there. But now you segued without saying that you were segueing into talking about doctors in Canada being told that they should suggest it.
Well, I don't see these things as very distinct, because the question is, what happens in the case that they don't suggest it, right? In other words, how is that policed exactly, right? Can a doctor hint but not suggest in the case that suggestion is not on the table? So in other words, my point is they're opening up a mechanism and a use case, which is mentally ill people. And the question is, well, what happens then?
Yeah.
What becomes fashionable? What loophole? I mean, we already have an effective loophole, which I believe must exist, but because it's a loophole and not a policy, the thing that is done when people have reached the very end of their lives, and in effect, they are not allowed to be euthanized, but they can be treated for pain, and painkillers can euthanize. So as long as your intent is to reduce their pain, you can effectively kill them.
Yep.
That thing obviously has a set of scenarios for which you want to have it available, right? Why put somebody through the torment of the very final stage of some terribly painful disease when the end is unavoidable, right? But what happens once you have that mechanism available, right, is it opens an opportunity for abuse of the worst kind. So I think the long and short of it is, even those of us who believe that there's probably an argument to be made in some cases, should be well aware that the abuse of this principle in this case is a huge hazard, and there's almost no way this could be deployed that we won't see abuse.
Yeah, I think that's true. I guess I think that's true for medical assistance in dying for physical illness as well. But I fall in a different place on that. And whereas it might seem like, well, physical versus mental illness, it leaves a physical trace, you can find the thing. That presumes that Western medicine is right about a whole lot of things. And it also presumes that pain leaves a mark, right? So different people experience pain very differently. And it really is assessment. There is no objective measure of the amount of pain you're experiencing. You know, doctors can look at the amount to which a person is riddled with cancer of a particular sort and say, they're in a lot of pain. Of that much we can be sure. But you know, some people with some, you know, particular pain sensitivities and experiences in life and other things may experience exactly the same diagnosis and, you know, imaging that is true, is a true physical representation of their body differently. So I feel like already we're on that slippery slope with what is the acronym MAID, medical assistance in dying for physical ailments. And I think you're right. I think I agree that it becomes too slippery for mental illness, and certainly that doctors proposing it is obscene. But it's not a clean break. We're already well into slippery territory. If I am already well into touch my mic, I am already well into slippery territory. If I say actually I am in favor of death with dignity for those who choose it if they are in extreme physical pain.
Well, okay. I think my position is not well represented then. I would argue that there is a fundamental human right not to exist, right? And that nobody can tell you that you have to exist. Now, this runs into trouble. Does that mean that anybody who commits a heinous crime and goes to prison has the right to opt out? Yeah. Presumably not. So that right then to not exist can't be absolute. But I believe it's pretty close to it. On the other hand, I believe that lots of people temporarily feel that that's what they want, right, and that we have an obligation not to allow those temporary feelings to,
And a physical illness, we have a greater understanding that we currently think is accurate, and I have a high certainty that it's accurate, that a physical illness we can tell that is terminal, right, as opposed to a mental illness, which in fact many mental illnesses abate with age. Right. Right.
So my concern here is the medicalization of that right. The right exists. I believe there's ambiguity. The problem is we are living in an era in which the Hippocratic Oath is back on its heels. Yeah. Right? Lots of doctors have been violating the Hippocratic Oath and their obligation to informed consent. And so the point is the most basic principles that make medicine thinkable are in jeopardy. At that moment, you want to medicalize the question of whether to be or not to be. That doesn't seem like a reasonable thing to do. It seems like a gateway to an unthinkable realm. Now, there has always been a concern that the people who cannot manage to exercise their right not to exist and therefore need help are really the gray area. And I don't know that anybody's figured out how you create an opportunity for somebody who's truly facing an unthinkable future.
And can't accomplish it themselves.
Right. How you do that. If it's not medical, what is it exactly? Right. So I don't know the answer to that question. I will say that there is a case, an Evergreen student who neither of us knew, who committed suicide while we were professors, and she documented her thought process extensively online, which made for excruciating reading. But it is a case that has always stuck out to me because the hell that she was living in was so unthinkably terrible that I totally understood why this was her conclusion. And it wasn't that she rushed to it, right? She had been raped and was basically incapable of controlling. She'd been raped as a child. She had been incapable of controlling the ongoing terror that this induced. And, she described like dreams in which she was chewing nails and glass, and that this was just an every night phenomenon. And so anyway, it did sort of wake me up to what a purely mental anguish could look like that would make the case. That said, this person sought help. It didn't work.
There's a lot of bad help out there.
Yeah, but I felt at the time, I was reading about it. I learned about her after she died. And I felt that it was a terrible, terrible tragedy that nobody figured out how to get her to the help that I assume must exist. But I was also left with the answer, how do you know it exists? How do you know that this person's trauma is reversible? That's a kind of faith on your part. So anyway, that's where I was left with it. But I think the problem is you're combining two realms here. One is a philosophical realm, right? Do you have the right not to be if you find life terrible? I feel that you do.
Yeah.
Do we have to provide a mechanism so everybody can exercise that right? Maybe we do. But if we provide that mechanism, what will it be used for? It will be used to off people who wouldn't exercise that right, so we can't have the mechanism. And I don't know the resolution for those puzzle pieces, but I know they're all on the table.
Yeah. No, and it's beyond slippery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, third question from the Discord this week. Subliminal art, subliminal art like that used in the Balenciaga, am I pronouncing that right? Balenciaga?
I think so.
Okay, let's start over. Balenciaga? Subliminal art like that used in the Balenciaga teddy bear bondage shoot is far more powerful than most of us understand. Is it possible that it has been weaponized in this particular way for much longer than we realize? Is it perhaps a major tool in the mass formation surrounding many of the cultural and political issues of our day? If we are ever to get out of this mess, I fear we'll be deprogramming for a long time to come. Yeah. So for those happily uninitiated into this particular story, we're not going to show pictures, but the high fashion brand, I guess, Balenciaga, which, as I told you after this happened, the extent of my knowledge of them came from a Simpsons special that they did, that the Simpsons and Balenciaga came together for some amount of time and did something. There was a photo shoot that involved little girls holding teddy bears in bondage regalia, and one of the pictures had court documents from a child porn case visible in the background.
A case in which a court struck down a restriction, I believe, enabling. So
I don't know that, but that would fit. Anyway, and they did it, and then they, I guess, deleted all of it. But of course, there's lots of screenshots.
Yeah, but I want to.
But the question is about subliminal art.
Yeah, we have to, as long as we're going to talk about this case, I think we have to do it justice. Mm-hmm. We don't know anything about what accounts for this thing showing up as part of their PR.
Yeah.
Maybe this corporation has pedophilic sympathies and somehow was winking at some clientele. I actually find it hard to imagine that would be something that they would do, even if
the brand?
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. So there are possibilities, for example, that something that wanted to, or that was hired to do the art broadcast this stuff, and that it wasn't the corporation itself. That also seems weird, right? The chances that such a thing brings the police to your door presumably would make that a very risky thing to engage in. So what's the point of broadcasting this?
Well, but the police don't come to your door for this. That's part of the point, that it seems really obvious to a lot of us, and there are a whole lot of people on the left who are like, what is your problem?
Right. I get it, and I'm horrified by the fact that that's the era we're living in, right? And I do think that this has something, let's put it this way. We never got an accounting of what happened with Epstein.
Right.
So the point is, we know that somehow pedophilia and political power, there's some story we don't know. We don't know what role it's playing. So anyway, I'm thoroughly disturbed by that. What I want to avoid is assuming that dots that seem to so easily connect, right? Once you know to look.
What are you imagining is connected? Or what are you saying people are regarding as connected?
Once you know to look into this particular fashion house's photo shoot, the evidence is staring you in the face.
Right.
But how many million people looked at these images and didn't think, is there some message here? They just thought fashion is weird, right?
Right, but that's part of the point of the question, right? That this is
right, but
this gets you on a subliminal level for many people.
Maybe it's economic. Maybe it's sabotage. Maybe it's the time-traveling money printer. In other words, what if somebody decided to sabotage a competing brand, right, by tarring it with the stigma of pedophilia? What if somebody decided to take some millions of dollars and turn it into billions of dollars by shorting a stock that could then be made to tank? Now, I will say I tested that hypothesis by looking at what I think is the stock price, and it did not plunge nearly as much as I would have imagined. So maybe time-traveling money printer is off the table as an explanation here. But I guess my point would be,
Or it failed.
What?
Or it failed. I mean, it doesn't sound likely to me, but just because it didn't work doesn't mean it wasn't
Well, it
intention.
doesn't sound likely. I don't know why. I would imagine that time-traveling money printer being a logically reasonable mechanism to hypothesize, that we will see events in which it's the opposite of pump and dump, right?
Right, but you're talking about sabotage here.
Yeah, I'm talking about.
There's just a lot of ways. I don't know. I was simultaneously suggesting to you that actually the fact that it didn't work doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen, and saying it doesn't seem that likely to me.
I don't know what doesn't seem that likely. It doesn't seem likely to explain this pattern, or it doesn't seem likely that people will make money through this mechanism.
Doesn't seem likely to be what explains this particular instantiation, because the idea that there are photographers, I don't know what the names for all of the people involved in manifesting such a shoot are, but photographers being one of many types of people who would have been required there, producers, runners, whatever, that there are a couple of people, and it would have taken more than one, but it didn't take the entire brand. It would have taken a couple of people to say, oh, we're gonna do this. And that there are some people in the entertainment industry who have these, interests and intentions, doesn't surprise me at all. That just seems more likely to be what happened.
I don't really understand it. I don't understand that position because, first of all, I may be wrong. It may be that the stigma of pedophilia is not enough.
I think it's just more parsimonious, because you still require those people that I'm talking about for what you're talking about, but then you also require an additional layer.
I don't think parsimony argues against this, because to the extent that this mechanism, that creating a historical event that alters the price of something, that allows you to take money and multiply it, that all you would have to do is cut somebody in for enough money that it would be worth them wrecking their own career if they could be guaranteed that they weren't going to jail over this. So I am not arguing that this happened. I am not arguing that Balenciaga is not fully guilty of broadcasting a message that something inside that corporation isn't witting. All I'm arguing is we have no idea what this was. And there are a lot of possibilities. And because there are a lot of possibilities and we have no idea what it was, I think it is incumbent on us not to leap to conclusions that what happened is a major fashion house broadcast its internal what would it be, a tolerance of, or
well, geez, I never heard that conclusion at all. I never thought that conclusion. I certainly never ran into it, and I didn't spend a lot of time with the story because it's so disturbing.
Yeah.
But I did think about it, wrote about it a little bit, and it never occurred to me that people were saying like, that's therefore what this fashion house is about. That seems like a crazy leap.
Well, I guess I don't know what conversation we're having then. I thought that people assumed that Balenciaga knew what it was doing, rather than some lower down folks inside Balenciaga used this photo shoot to broadcast some message that they liked, and that, the brand had nothing to do with it. That's certainly almost a possibility.
I think you're strawmanning my position. I didn't say had nothing to do with it. There's got to be, presumably there's some chain of command, like for any photo shoot that ends up representing the brand, there's got to be some, someone at each position who's like signed off.
Yep.
And very often those sign-offs are rote. It didn't look
right,
or fine, or isn't she cute? Like, there's everything from like, haha, got it, and yes, thank you for this. Which there may be a few of those people, but I don't assume that that's most of what those sign-offs would have been if that's what was happening.
Okay, but then I don't really even understand what the issue is, because we know there's way too much of this in public, right? We know, for example, that Musk has been purging people who were engaged in this stuff on Twitter. And
I don't know who you think we is. Most people don't know this.
What I'm saying is I don't understand. It seems to me that what makes this story unique is that there is a major brand involved. But if the major brand is only tangentially involved because something inside of it was, rote signing off on stuff that other people decided to abuse for their own twisted purposes, then, it's like every other story. It's the major brand that makes it interesting. And my point is I don't actually know what role the major brand was playing here, if any.
I don't either. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. So I think we're just talking at cross purposes now. I'm not sure what you think has been revealed by me saying
Well, I hope I'm not getting your position wrong. I will just say my position is there's something about this story that feels like, oh my God, look at these dots that connect. And my point is, do they connect because this was a very thinly veiled something that we can now see? Or do they connect because somebody wants us to connect them for purposes that are not transparent?
Right. And I'm saying I don't understand the story with dots connecting like that. That's not how I read it at all. I didn't do that analysis on it.
All right.
But regardless, it was not, I don't know how many people it was seen by. And the people I know who saw it for the grotesquerie that it was. I don't know to what degree people did see it and thought, oh, Balenciaga,
You're talking
I like that
about
purse.
after the story was revealed rather than how many people saw the campaign?
Yes. So I'm trying to get back to the question.
Okay.
Subliminal art. To what degree people who saw it, who don't think, oh God, what are you doing? What is going on here? Who don't see it for what it is, may have been affected by it. That's, once you know what it is, the subliminal part doesn't work on you, right? It's not like that. So the question here is, put aside this particular example, right? To what degree are, the examples that I learned about when I was doing like film and cultural critique in high school, because that's what you did in LA in the 80s at some schools, were examples that are obvious in retrospect, right? Where they were actually like, words that were inserted in like one in every 1/20th of a second in frames occasionally during like TV shows or, something like back when it was actually frames per second,
Yep.
right? that actually got people to want to drink Coke or whatever it was, like actual subliminal advertising that was too fast. It went by too fast for your conscious brain to know what had happened. But yeah, you did kind of have a hankering for Coke afterwards. So that was the crude stuff of the film era. And there has been much described of what is possible since. And the question at one level, which is, it's a huge question, is to what degree is this happening? And specifically, to what degree is the mass formation potentially, around things like COVID vaccines, and there is no effective treatment except for Paxlovid or whatever, due to things like that? And I don't really know how to answer the question, because it feels, I don't even have, there's lots of examples that you can bring up over in trans space, over in trans ideology space of normalizing grotesqueries. Right? But what is, other than smiling celebrities, other than Dolly Parton singing about vaccines to the tune of Jolene in advance of getting a vaccine, right? That was effective, but it wasn't subliminal.
Well, no, I think the problem is subliminal is probably a continuum. How subliminal? Just barely or thoroughly? And how complex a channel is it? I would say, look, all advertising, or almost all sophisticated advertising, is subliminal, right? The fact that a car company knows that if it hires an attractive woman to sit either in the driver's seat or in the passenger seat, and to give a particular look to the camera, that will cause either male potential buyers to feel enticed, or female potential buyers to feel desired, or whatever, that causes them to view a car, a mechanical device, in some way, right? So human sexuality then affects the way people view a car enough that the billions of dollars that are spent on this kind of advertising is worth doing. That tells us that brands that say advertising doesn't work are being outcompeted by brands that say it does work, and give me some. And so basically I would say the channel exists. The fact that you don't know that you have a positive sense about this car because of the attractive model that somebody paid to sit in it, right, tells you it's subliminal, right? You were not conscious of your change in belief about this car. And the question then is, given that the subliminal channel exists enough for advertising to be based on it, what other stuff is being sent down this pipe? And I think we saw very sophisticated propaganda with respect to COVID that caused lots of people to misunderstand what the question was, who their friends were, all of that stuff. So my basic answer to the question itself is, Balenciaga aside, I think propaganda has been turned high-tech. It is highly effective, and that you have to use some mechanism like what we discussed in the main podcast, in which you're comparing your model over time and saying, to the extent that propaganda causes you to believe wrong things, your model won't be very predictive. So you could detect it, and you could say, I wonder what I'm paying attention to that isn't helping me, because my model's not getting better. In fact, it's getting worse, right? Whereas if you're good at tuning that stuff out, then your model should get better rapidly, because you're not being steered. So anyway, I think it's a big problem, and I think we've recently seen just how catastrophic its results can be, is the short answer.
Okay, first question from DarkHorseEmissions.com. It actually came in many weeks ago. How do you feel about the Pinker blank slate conclusion that based upon twin study data, parents are fungible? Did we not do this?
We did not do it. We did not do it. I think we were planning to go, and then the live stream didn't work, or the Q&A didn't work. We can't fully explore this here, nor am I ready to do it. But the idea that parents are fungible is nonsense. And we can tell that it's nonsense based on the degree to which parents invest in lessons. In other words, our instincts is the wrong word, but for these purposes it works well enough. Our instincts to invest in the education of our children is the result of the fact that that has had important impacts. And the problem is those studies are not what they purport to be. They're A, limited, right? They use certain measures and proxies. There's no telling what they miss. But B, there's the entire madness surrounding what happened to the idea of heritability, right? And the problem is that heritability became narrowly defined in the post-DNA era. After the discovery of DNA as the genetic material, our understanding of heritability got narrowed, and it got defined around certain oxymorons, right? Like defining heritability as the degree of phenotypic variation due to the differences in alleles. And the problem is things that are fixed, that is to say, things that everybody has, you know, the fact of a human nose, right? Every human has a nose. The human nose is not heritable. Why? Because everybody's got one, right? Nose shape is heritable because we get different alleles that affect the shape. But the point is that is counterintuitive for a reason, because this term doesn't mean what we think it means. So anyway, every time I've delved into this, what I've found is conclusions about heritability that are overly instantiated because nobody really understands that the bodies are buried under that false concept. Anyway, so I guess I would leave it there. But
okay.
Yes, parents matter, irrespective of what the experiments claim to tell you. There may be surprising ways in which they don't. But do they not matter at all? No, that's nonsense.
Okay, so reminder that some of these questions are coming from previous live streams. This is from 2 weeks ago. Is there any room in the calculation of whether to forgive for the impact of terror on the ability of people to behave logically? With the amygdala in the driver's seat, good judgment often goes out the window. There was a lot of terror these past few years. I do think that it can be mitigating, but I also feel that a lot of people really leaned into their fear. A lot of people relished being fearful and scared and helpless and hopeless. And I don't know, I wouldn't want to be the adjudicator of how much you did or didn't, and therefore how much, you know, if you leaned into it, if you consciously allowed yourself to be more scared, more fearful than you needed to be, then I don't want to mitigate. Then you know, you need to really own up to all the stuff, more so, rather than if you actually were carried away in a such that you absolutely could not cause yourself to see reason because you were so scared, so overcome with fear. This is the sort of thing that obviously, you know, court cases can hinge on with regard to whether or not you had the mental capacity to understand what you were doing. With those cases, it's one of those things I've always felt like I'm so glad that I'm not in the business of adjudicating these. I just do not want to be involved. I saw way too much of people relishing their fear.
I'm going to go the other way, and I'm going to say it's quite mitigating, but only in one circumstance, which is that you own up to the role that it played in unhooking reason, right? And the point is, look, if you don't own up to that, if it's not in your own analysis of how you screwed this up, then you're not safe, because that'll happen again.
Yeah.
Right? But if, for example, Sam, who was quite clearly terrified of COVID, and, you know, there was plenty of reason to be frightened of it. I think it's much more destructive than the case fatality rate suggests, but terrified is not a reasonable, it is not a position conducive to reason, as the question suggests. And so if Sam were to say, look, my fear got the better of me, and it caused me to misunderstand where I was and who was speaking rationally, then the answer is, well, now we know something, which is that A, you know that your fear will do this. And that means if it happens again, we can say, hey, Sam, is it happening again? Is this your fear driving?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I would say it is very mitigating, but only if you push it to consciousness and are capable of recognizing what role it played. Other than that, the point is, okay, that's a defect in your cognition, and we need to be concerned about what role it plays in everything.
Well, I think that's a better answer overall than the one I gave. But I also, mine is a narrower response by a lot. But I also do feel that it's relevant. I don't know how to make it manifest, though. Like I said, I don't know how to operationalize the degree to which you chose to be fearful. Maybe your answer eliminates the need to, but I'm not compelled that it does.
Well, I guess I was steering clear of your assertion that people were inviting fear, which strikes me as totally plausible, right? People go to horror films because there's some part of them that delights in fear, and
yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, I think this is one of these personality traits or proclivities that is going to be, and I'm going to use the word gendered here because this is a place where we should be able to talk about sex differences in behavior, which is gendered, average sex differences that women are more likely to be willing to be in fear, I think. And I think that some women will be more likely to be totally unwilling, like no way, no how, not going to go there, that thing is dangerous. But some, I would think that being willing to be in fear would go hand in hand with sort of wanting the Prince Charming to ride over the horizon, wanting someone to come save you. And so the looking for authorities, oh, isn't Fauci so dreamy? Isn't this, looking for the person who's going to come and rescue you from your own fear and hopelessness and helplessness is extraordinarily dangerous. And I think is a big part of what we were seeing through a lot of the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting. You have exactly the inverse understanding of that pattern, the narrow part. I would say men have an incentive to get women into positions that trigger their fear, like going to a scary movie. Right?
Yeah.
Or
but we had a population who would become fearful. So to the degree that Fauci made, who were the men here, right?
Right.
So there were too many. There were too many, and the fact that a lot of the people who were perpetrating the most damage were women. The public figures like Walensky, like Psaki, who are pronounced Biden's first or press secretary. But they were encouraging the fear, but it would have worked differently, right? Like they were triggering the fear, I think, mostly in women by being like, if you care about your children, you will be just as scared and do just as stupid things as I'm doing, sort of thing, right? Whereas, yes, I think in a the word is abused, but in a toxic proto-relationship between a man and a woman, a man may exactly want to make a woman more fearful so that she feels like she has to cling to him in order to be safe. Right.
Right. And I do think that there's it's kind of a crossover here that you're pointing to where something figured out that it could frighten people. And I don't think we know enough about, maybe somebody does, but I don't know enough about what people, and it probably is very different by sex, what people tend to do when frightened. In other words, the mass formation thing, people driven together in terror, right? They may find each other. They may trust people that they would never trust or even like under other circumstances, because the point is, it is, the huddled group in the cave with the scary thing outside that, becomes the mode of survival.
It felt like circling the wagons to people, I think. And, for a while, it was those of us who were unvaccinated who were the marauding hordes, putting them all at risk.
Yep.
And, how was that made to be the narrative? it wouldn't have worked if they hadn't felt the need to circle the wagons in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's quite right. It was like, the dimensionless pod that was immune from the virus, fearful of those who refused to do their part and had become zombies.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the narrative.
Yeah.
And oddly, didn't turn out to be that way.
No, it was the dimensionless pod zombies that we had to worry about.
Yeah, plot twist.
Okay, next question. Although, actually, I feel like there was one that was relevant to what we were just talking about. Let me see if I can quickly find it. Maybe not. This is not exactly what I was thinking, but friends and family, etc., labeled me as problematic and worse when I objected after getting pericarditis. Who was putting whom at risk? So it's...
Wow. Yeah, I have to say, when I went to the conference in Britain,
like May of this year, yeah.
My central theme and the message that I believed needed to get out was, you can tell what this beast is by its gaslighting of the injured.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? If you think the injured are rare, then you ought to be very surprised that it's treating these people as if they're making it up, right? And that that the fact that it will gaslight the very people who, in some cases, signed up for trials that weren't safe, were then injured and are now being treated as pariahs, that thing tells you you're dealing with an immoral monster that will do anything.
Yeah, it does. It does. And this is a little bit related too. The other day I saw a very long queue of people. It took me a moment to realize they were lining up for vaccination. Mostly older folk, but a good minority of younger people too. Will I turn out to be overly pessimistic that I saw this as a contemporary version of camp prisoners queuing for a promised warm shower? ? From Matt in the UK.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. It seems to me, if you think back to the model that we were talking about during the podcast, it seems to me that the evidence that should tell you that whatever mechanism you were using to establish for yourself what was true, an ever larger fraction of people should have run across some evidence that what they were doing wasn't working.
Yeah.
Right? A person that they know who's been injured, for example. And that means that the people who are still adhering to that narrative, they're in deep. Whatever mechanism they're using to fend off information is industrial strength. And, that's what I would think if I saw a line of people still eager for this, in spite of the fact that, the likelihood that it's doing you more harm than good is quite clear.
Yeah. Does free will have to be a binary? Why not degrees of freedom? It's not quite the right phrasing, but are we simply an object moving through time and space along a predetermined path, or have we evolved a mental toolkit which allows for some degree of deviation from that path? Perhaps a toolkit which can be upgraded and improved, allowing for greater degrees of freedom as our truth-seeking methodologies are refined.
Yeah, this is exactly what I argued to Sam when I talked to him about this, which was...
Here on DarkHorse, like one of the very first
It wasn't one of the very first.
It was in the first 10 for sure.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I've misremembered where it was. In any case, my argument to Sam was, look, there is some truth to the idea that we have far less free will than we think. And the problem is at the place where we decide that number might be 0. It can't be 0.
Yeah.
Sam, you yourself are living proof it's not 0. And in fact, much of what you do is you try to liberate yourself through contemplation. And, the point is, yes, you have a little. No, it's not as extensive as you think. But you want to live a life that means something? Taking the little bit of free will you have and using it to enlarge the amount of free will that you actually have, realized free will, is the game. But, and I think this is where we hang up, is that people who hear you defend free will think that you're saying, oh, I'm totally free.
Right.
And the answer is no. It's very small, right? We are mostly a set of circuits.
No, constraint is real and across all the domains.
Yep.
Some of which some of which presumably we have not yet defined in a way that is the most useful to understand how it is constraining us. Right?
And the point, it did not land for some reason, but the point I tried to use to make this case to Sam was, if we were going to be truly unfree, one thing we can say is that selection would arrange for anybody who had the chance to produce lots of offspring to do it. And that Sam himself, by limiting himself to one family, is demonstrating that he is exercising free will over the program to which he would be helpless if free will was really a zero.
I'm not sure. I feel like there's a better example. I don't know what it is, but the reason that one doesn't work for me so well is because, you know, over in evolution space, obviously there are real considerations about, you know, how far along sort of K to R selected you're going to be, and how, you know, how much you're actually going to leave an impact, a genetic and otherwise impact in the future, depending on how much you invest in a few. I don't remember where I put which, but how much you invest in a few versus sort of explosive breeding assemblages, just, you know, fertilize or produce as many eggs as you can and then be gone and never meet the kids. So, you know, both of those are fit in the environments and for the organisms which they have. And so saying, you know, it isn't a different program that is also under some circumstances fit and might be more fit if you were employing it, the thing that you would be doing but for free will, strikes me as a little disappearing the analysis of mating systems theory.
No, because the fact is, a guy like Sam, with resources, attractive guy, well-spoken, could fully avail himself of the opportunity that he's already invested in and add to it opportunities that he's not availing himself of, without compromising, you know, his K-selected side. So even if we take Sam out of the equation, which we probably should,
Sorry, yes.
if the point is, if we were going to be unfree somewhere, it would be with respect to deploying selection's program for increasing fitness. We would have the toughest time unhooking that one. And it's not the case, right? The fact is we have a relatively easy time unhooking that one.
You're not arguing for a sort of a move into obvious polygyny territory, but rather a sort of, you know, what rich dudes who don't have the moral sense that apparently Sam does, will often avail themselves of.
Yep. But at the very least, we can just say generally we would expect people deciding to do something other than increase their fitness. That would be very, very, I mean, take the following counter example. Okay. Imagine that you wanted to take your hand and put it into a pot of boiling water. You would not have the free will to do it. You could not make yourself do it, right? So the point is, you're very unfree there. You're more free to engage in family planning, prioritizing works of art that you might want to create. So the question is, why are you so free where you would expect yourself to be maximally constrained if free will is zero?
Yeah, okay. I have to tell you that when you put that image in my head of plunging your own hand into the pot of boiling water, what occurred to me was, now that you have increased my own uncertainty in whether or not my own knees are real, I think that I would be more willing to plunge one of my knees into a vat of boiling water, not yet having had the existence of my hand called into question, because not the same, like different simulation, I'm thinking, right?
Oh, absolutely. Your knees are, there's some chance that the cost you will pay for boiling away your knees is zero. I wouldn't act on that if I were you, but I take your point. Yeah.
All right. No one wants to incur the social penalty of being branded a sexist, racist, or transphobe. What are the epithets for indicting those who discriminate against the unjabbed? I'd love to crowdsource that. I don't have anything offhand.
I mean, okay, I don't have the term.
Yeah.
But the idea is there were all kinds of people dragged into great horrors, involved in the Holocaust, involved in gulags. People have been dragged into participating in horrors that their conscious self would have said violated their values, and yet they find themselves involved in it. Mm-hmm. And so the point is, useful idiot doesn't quite get you there, but the idea that you are somebody who could be drafted into something that you would find vile if we described it to you mm-hmm. is the indictment, right? Yeah. That your thinking capacity is feeble enough mm-hmm. that you could be one of them, right?
Yeah, but I mean that, yes, but too abstract, like doesn't make for an epithet, right? Like I absolutely agree with you, but it's not pithy enough, right?
Yeah.
Like we need, we're at the most, I would say like 3 words, something, right? And like, sucker, gullible, these things, that's not, it's too generic.
Well, it's something like brown shirt, right? That's the category of person that one would want to evoke. Now, I'm not.
Yeah, but again, it's an abstraction about, and that's not an epithet. It's actually a description of a population, right?
Yep.
There's like are you the type of person who demonstrably follows instructions even when it's bad for everyone? And there's the, are you a demographic bigot? Do you have ludicrous senses of one or the other sex? Some races, trans people. Transphobe is a different category, but the unvaccinated. Like, is there one for? What, you got it? Or
I kind of do have it. It's not going to work, but I think it's awesome. Mobius brain.
Again, I mean, that's funny. I like it, but again, it's more like brown shirt. It's descriptive of the, like, how did you end up here, as opposed to this is your conclusion, right? Like racist says, like, I don't know which race you're, like, you've got some feelings against, but I know what that means. Whereas,
I think you're throwing out Mobius brain too quickly.
Well, but you see the different kind of categories I'm talking about. There's 2 different categories. One of them is, this describes the demographic thing that you have a bias against. And one is, you have a personality trait or a mental defect or something that allows you to end up becoming a brown shirt. And it's called Mobius brain, right? Like there's that thing. And then there's like, what is the demographic group that you are bigoted against? Is it a racial group? Is it a sex? Is it people in support of medical freedom, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I see it. I see the problem.
Right. I don't have anything. It's not like it's not like I'm saying, no, I like mine better. I don't have one, but I would like, maybe I would actually be interested in crowdsourcing an answer to that. So, a tweet that tagged one or both of us that might be useful.
Yep.
Yeah. Can we please stop using the term democracy like it's a good thing, when what we want is a republic? The difference being, you can't vote certain things away in the latter. 2 wolves and a sheep, as the saying goes. I don't know what the 2 wolves and a sheep saying refers to. And I admit that I'm not educated enough. I wouldn't have been able to come up with the difference between the 2. Being that you can't vote certain things away in a republic, but you can in a democracy. Nor can I fact check that claim, although this is someone who writes in a lot and I trust them in general.
The problem is I'm not sure you want to get rid of it, because
Want to get rid of
the term democracy, the use as if it is a positive trait.
Okay.
Because I mean, really, the right trait, the one that precisely describes the thing that is of value, mm-hmm. is consent of the governed. Consent of the governed is the sole source of legitimacy of governance, right? The consent of the governed. And so we don't have a democracy in the sense that we don't vote on everything. And we don't have a representative democracy because we do have constitutional principles that are not up for debate, mm-hmm. Although they are up for amendment. So in some sense, they are up for debate. It's not a good thing, but
It's an indirect representative democracy.
It is an indirect representative democratic republic. The core thing that must be defended against all antagonistic principles is the consent of the governed. It is imperfect, but the point is it is vital. And if you eliminate that, you could have one generation of benevolent dictator, but that's it. We don't have a mechanism for picking benevolent dictators, so the point is you'd have to get lucky and get one, and you wouldn't get two, and so disaster. So the point is we are left with consent of the governed as the thing that must be, it's the hill to die on. And the problem is that, you know, do you want to go through the process of educating the public that it's speaking too imprecisely when it says democracy, and that it really needs to think about the consent of the governed being the sole source of legitimacy of governance? Like that's a mouthful. So,
but I mean, maybe Marussia here is arguing for precision in our speech.
Well, I mean, you know, I do try to speak of the consent of the governed. It's a very, you know, it's equal protection under there's certain phrases that really do function as the underlying operating system, and I do try to, you know, it's not that I never say democracy, but I do try to use those phrases to keep them alive and in conscious thought. I mean, you know, and I try to prune the bad ones, right? Law and order, that's not good. The one we should use is rule of law, right? You want the rule of law. Law and order is kind of a reactionary desire to police things rather than an agreement that what we need are explicit rules that we know about, can understand, and that a reasonable person can follow and not worry about the police if they do, right? So anyway, yes, it's a good instinct to do this precisely, but you can't always.
Yep. Okay. I know we've been at it for a while, but we've barely touched...
Barely scratched the surface.
So we're going to do several more, and then, boy, I just don't know if we're going to have a Q&A for a couple of weeks after this, so I'm going to just do as many as we can here. Have you seen the mysterious beasts of Spieden Island yet? You can sometimes spot them on the shore if you sail by on a quiet sloop. Speaking of which, I highly recommend getting a small day sailor, around 15 to 25 feet long. Best way to explore the San Juans. Anyway, bring your cameras on this adventure. Love you guys.
We are definitely not going to do the Spieden Island thing until the sun, until we are on the other side of the sun and the days are getting longer and warmer. But it is definitely on the list.
Did you have any idea what he's talking about?
Oh, I 100%
Mysterious beasts was Spieden
Island? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was a hunting lodge, and it has all of these, I think, all African exotic species on it. It's long since been
I guess I did know this. Yeah. So it's not, so the San Juans where we now live is the southern part of an archipelago that includes the Gulf Islands, which are Canadian. And on the American part, there are 4 islands that are ferry served, and we live on one of them. And then there are a whole lot of other, I don't know if it's more than 100, probably. It must be.
Many of them
many
too
more
tiny
than,
to live on.
Yeah, so.
Not 100 probably, but.
But more than 100 total. But of the other inhabited islands, there are dozens.
Yep.
So obviously you need your own boat if you live on one of those. And Spieden is one of them. But does Spieden not have people...
Spieden is a private island.
So one family or something.
One family owns it.
Yeah.
It has these weird fauna left on it. I think
I do remember this now from years ago. Yeah,
not allowed to land on it,
okay.
But you can go by, and the creatures are. I've looked for them on satellite image. I don't see them, but
that's cool.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, for sure, that's on.
I feel like at one point, I mean, we've been trying to move up here for ages, back before we could ever actually really consider it, and did manage to look at various islands that were even farther outside of our reach because they would have required a boat, which we have never had. But I remember hearing this story. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, at this point, but have not been there. And no, we don't have a quiet sloop.
Nope, the sloop is loud as hell.
We don't have a sloop
Creaky.
at all. What are you talking about? Do we have a boat I don't know about?
No.
Please tell me we don't. Not that there's not some interest in that, but if I don't know about it, there might be a problem.
Right.
Okay. It seems rhetorical and also like an answer is necessary. When I'm listening to almost all of accepted media, I'm told something different, especially about vaccination and all things COVID. How do I know what to believe anymore? It actually says vacation, not vaccination, but I'm assuming in context what was meant was vaccination.
Yeah. You can combine them now.
Yeah, I'm told something different about vacation. I'd love to hear the media just take on vacation in wildly disparate ways. That could be fun. That could be an amusing endeavor. But I mean, it's this hopeless truth of modernity that many people are awake to, and the fact that so many people aren't awake to it is the thing that can render you even more hopeless, right?
I think the sad fact is you should stop listening to things that chronically lie to you, that many things that didn't always chronically lie to you now do. Mm-hmm. So at the point that, you detect that the New York Times may spout pure propaganda on certain topics, you shouldn't take it very seriously when it tries to present a nuanced case around Sam Bankman-Fried, right?
Yeah.
So the point is, okay, I'm not listening to that outlet because that outlet has proved that it isn't a newspaper, okay? Mm-hmm. And then, so you start looking for things that A, don't do that, they don't lie, and then B, within the category of things that don't lie, you look for things that have a predictive track record. And,
right.
Nothing's going to have a perfect record,
yep.
but things that have a predictive track record and things that correct their own errors are things you can listen to. Do you trust them completely? No, but you can eliminate the possibility, or almost eliminate the possibility, that they're ill-intentioned.
Yeah.
Right?
But yeah, don't give your intellectual proxy, that's not quite the right framing, but don't give your intellectual proxy entirely over to anyone. But, and we've said this before, and I think we actually say this in our book as well. We both used to begin our programs when we were teaching at Evergreen, very first day, by saying, don't trust me. I'm the person that the school hired, and you're here, and I'm not your employee. You don't work. I don't work for you, we would say to the students. But also, just because I'm here with some terminal degree in a field that is related to something you think you want to learn about doesn't mean that I'm trustworthy or honest or have anything useful to tell you. Because many faculty don't. So we had to earn students' trust, and we told them that. That if 5 weeks in, they were still questioning every single utterance out of our mouth, that's exhausting and pointless, right? But as any source reliably proves that it knows what it's doing and makes predictions that are borne out, then you put more and more of your faith, for lack of a better term here, in that source. But that faith is based, that trust is based on what you know, what came in, what already came.
Which doesn't immunize you from a long con.
Of course not. Yeah.
But one thing I want to, it's not really a correction, but when you describe what we said to students, don't trust me isn't really the meaning, right? And you got there in the end, but the point is, don't trust me because I've been put in front of you.
True.
Right?
Yes.
I want you to trust me, but I want you to arrive at that trust. I don't want you to start out with
the fact that I walked into the room with a degree and a sheet of all of your names is not reason to trust me. Right.
Many people who will do that are not worthy of your trust.
Right.
So anyway, it is a good principle. And, I would also say dividing trust into two things is essential. You can trust somebody completely with respect to character. It might be wrong, but it is not illogical to trust somebody's character, right? Their values, what they say that they are, what they say they are. It is a mistake to trust anybody completely at the level of judgment, even yourself. Right? The point is, judgment is a flawed process. And if you just say, well, I really trust that person, and you don't distinguish between their values and their judgment, you will get into trouble because they will make an error. And it's not that they were trying to make the error, but you got to be aware that your trust should be a lot harder to earn at the point of view, from the perspective of judgment than decency.
Yeah. My doctors, one by one, chased me away because of my choice to not get the jab. Do you have a plan in place for medical attention? You know, we had found a number of people in Portland who were not allopathic doctors who did excellent work and delivered excellent medical treatment. We did not have a plan in place for an emergency that would send a person to the emergency room. Still don't.
Yep.
And you know, by moving, have moved away from the small but excellent set of health practitioners whom we had found in Portland. And I think I've said this on air too, but at one point, maybe last winter, we still lived in Portland, I fell, this piece of pipe sticking up, and I fell and I cut myself on the pipe, and I fell on concrete. It was icy and I was all alone at the house. It was really cold out. It was dark. Like everything was bad about it. And I'm usually not a fearful person. And apropos our conversation from earlier, I do take pride in that, in not succumbing to fear and you know, keeping my wits about me and such. But I realized as I was sort of landing, and I had this fear, and the fear was not, oh my God, what if I'm injured? Like, I've been really injured and I've gotten better, and I feel like I know that I can recover from most physical injury at this point. My fear was, oh my God, I'm injured such that I'm going to need to go to the hospital.
Right.
And it's a real problem now, and I don't have a general answer.
Yeah, we don't have a good answer. We do have lots of people who care about us, who are doctors, who have fought the same fight. And so from the point of view of, can we get eyes on a situation, I think we're in the best position of anybody, mm-hmm. right? We've got the best doctors, and we've been fighting shoulder to shoulder with them. That does not answer the question of what you do if you're being rushed to the emergency room.
Right.
We don't know. Right. And, you know, at the moment, we are crossing our fingers that this doesn't happen, but that's long term. We can't live like this. And how we rescue the doctors who were dragged early into assertions about COVID that turned out not to be true, how we recover a relationship with them mm-hmm. so they can go back to doctoring and never do that again, I don't know. But it is kind of the question, because it was like they sidelined an entire profession in one go.
Yeah, and it's a profession we need. We need it. Totally different topic here. Actually, no. I'm gonna come back to this one for sure. But let's just stick with something similar for a little bit. With the decreasing birth rate and increasing death rate among the vaxxed, will politicians be held to account?
I doubt it.
Yep. Doubt it too. Emergencies Act inquiry is underway. Trudeau now looks more like a vacuous tyrant. Yep, a vacuous tyrant. A lot of fur was just released.
Yep.
It's all over my pants already. Wow. A vacuous tyrant. Yep. What kind of Ken doll?
Duplicitous.
Duplicitous Ken doll. Why do I always forget that? It's so brilliant.
I don't know.
Duplicitous Ken doll. Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of just a comment. Okay, we'll go back to the one I was going to, which is rather a different topic. Any advice for those of us raising young boys in how to deal with the porn issue as they get older? Parentheses, sorry if this topic embarrasses you, Zach. I would actually, I don't think I would, it would be fascinating to have you and your son, your older son, our producer, have a conversation in public about this.
Yep.
Because he has, I don't think he's,
Happy to.
What's that? Happy to?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, not embarrassed, and feels very strongly about it, and sees what among his generation as well.
So
so let's table that for right now. But
well, I want to give a short
yeah.
Answer to the question, and then we can return to it.
Mm-hmm.
The short answer to the question is it couldn't really be more dangerous. The thing that is being sold, especially to young men, is something that at best will cripple and tremendously alter their sexual selves. And so being clear with your kid that this isn't the, stigma of pornography that existed when we were kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the
pornography... Do you have a Playboy under your mattress?
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. This is about your own well-being, and I, your parent, am speaking to you on behalf of your future self. You do not want to let these people access your sexual mind because it will distort your relationship. Sex is a very important tool in the relationship toolkit. And if you let these money-obsessed people alter your sexual self because it enriches them, you're affecting your relationship with the people or the person who will be the most important person in your life. Right? So don't do it. This is you talking to you through me. It's not me talking to you. This isn't about me. This is about you.
We're in a dog standoff.
Yeah, stalemate is what's going on here.
Come on up, Dougie. Come on. Good Lord.
All right, you work on the questions. I'll work on the dog.
Predictable. That was a great answer, and I actually... Yeah, let us return to the question of whether or not a conversation. I think that between the two of you should happen publicly. I think that would be incredibly powerful and eye-opening. Madison, you have never not been allowed on this couch.
Dad, touch her nose. That gets her up there. Well, don't just tap it. I meant indicate that you should go up there.
Come here, come on, sweetie. Apparently neither of us have the magic, Zach. Okay. What is Okay. Did it. What is hyperactivity? Is it mostly learned? Is it linked to consciousness? Or no, is it linked to conscientiousness? That's what it says. I don't know which of those two words she means. This is Echo. Love to you too. What is hyperactivity? Is it mostly learned? Is it linked to conscientiousness? Is what she's written.
I would guess that this is a mixture of several different phenomena.
Yeah.
One is hypernovelty, that we live in circumstances that are, the child is not supposed to be sitting nicely, facing forward, minding his manners. The child is supposed to be out in the bush. You're supposed to be sort of aware where the child is, but the child is supposed to be learning the lessons of life from the world.
Yes.
And so our novel world has put children in a situation where they may be fidgety, antsy, whatever, and it's not an indicator of it's a mismatch between the child and the environment, not a defect.
Yeah, well, it's a defect, but not in the child, in the environment.
Right.
It's a defect in the environment.
Is there a pathology in which that defect is exacerbated by something in the child that's off? Undoubtedly.
Sure.
Is it further exacerbated by a pharmaceutical industry that wants to sell you some pill to deal with it?
Ding,
so
ding, ding.
Have they increased the definition? Have they broadened it so they can diagnose more people and drug them with something that ostensibly has some useful effect? And so combine those three things and you will get an answer in which it's partially a PR campaign by PR, partially a mismatch between child and environment, and partially something that may be pathological as a result of developmental disturbance or whatever.
Which itself is brought on not just by the school environment, but the food environment and the family environment,
by the lead in the water,
media environment, the lead in the water environment, hyper novelty, which is where you started. All of the environments. Is there a defect here? Yeah, there's a lot of defects here. Has it gone on for so long that the child is now irrecoverably defective? Probably not. especially a young kid, probably if you fix all the environmental problems that are going on, usually you're going to have a kid who's a decent, interesting kid. But will that decent, interesting kid ever be able to sit straight in rows and raise their hand whenever they want to utter something or go pee? No, and that doesn't say anything about how awesome and decent that kid is.
Yep.
I don't know who this person is. Would you consider a podcast with Rahin Kassam? Do you know the name?
Nope.
I also don't know what this refers to, but I'll go for it. The origin story of the woman of Willendorf seems off. Does a time-traveling Nicole Kidman have no shot in the prehistoric dating market? Any idea what it's being referred to? No.
I know who Nicole Kidman is.
Terrific.
Yep.
We enter with the same amount of insufficient knowledge on that one. Sorry. Okay, one more of these. So I'm just going to go through them. Like, hi, is there any chance to invite Dr. Sabine Hazan as a guest? She's doing a great job regarding the COVID, ivermectin, gut, and microbiome. People need to hear more about her work. Don't know that one either. We do have someone who's supposed to be actually not through the questions. You should have them going through the questions too and picking up recommendations, and have someone going through comments actually on YouTube. So actually, put those of you who asked questions like this, if you put them in as a comment on YouTube, they should get picked up, and at some point we may see them again. There's no promises here, but I don't grok your complaints with Elon's Mars mission. We only have one planet. We could have two. Why risk all eggs in one basket? Also, why not interview him like you did with Schellenberger?
Musk?
Easier said than done on that one.
Yeah. Glad to interview. Boy, there's so many things I would love to talk with him about. If he's interested, definitely. Yeah. My problem is not that there's anything wrong with the idea of going to Mars. In fact, I think I've argued on DarkHorse that it will be terrifically valuable to go through the exercise of getting people to Mars, setting up a colony if we can, bringing people back alive. All of those things are great goals, even if there's nothing on Mars for us, even if terraforming Mars and making it habitable is unlikely. Mm-hmm. I will also say that there's the possibility that something like AGI would allow us to terraform Mars in a way that is unforeseeable from here, but not that many years in the future. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go is kind of my objection. It's not an interesting place. It's not going to be an interesting place. Even if you terraformed it, you're going to terraform it with things that work. It's not going to be the beautiful, fascinating planet that I live on.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, all I'm arguing is two things. One, Mars sucks more than you think.
So much more.
So much more than you think.
So much more.
And two, the idea that our ability to inhabit it meaningfully is close enough that it constitutes a second basket for the eggs in the near term is simply wrong.
Yeah.
But am I for us going? Absolutely. Hell yeah.
As long as us doesn't necessarily include you or me or.
It's not going to. I can disappoint them now and just say
You can have my seat. Give it to someone else.
Give it to someone else.
Yes, Zach?
I think you could have 7 or 8 hours of interesting exploration there and go on back.
Yeah, on Mars.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's plenty to explore.
Oh, yeah, day trip.
7 or 8 hours. Yeah, absolutely.
Day trip to Mars.
After maybe a week could get especially boring, but.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and I guess I wonder, because we've heard versions of this question before, like, what the hell is your problem? Isn't this obviously the thing we want? And no, I mean, the person asking this question is very respectful and all. But I think in part this reveals something that's just a really fundamental truth about you and me and our family, and it's a large part of why we became the kinds of biologists that we did. Like, we go outside and we see things we didn't expect. Even if we go outside the same front door we've been going out for, months or years or decades, depending on where we are at the moment. And that's magical. And you can understand that magic with science and with creativity and with everything. And an entirely created landscape, hello friend, just doesn't have the potential to have that kind of surprise in it. This does, though.
Yes.
This little critter that just came down my shoulder. Okay, it is. We've been going at it for a while. We're going to just do a couple more here. Hello, friend. I don't really understand this one. I'm going to read it. Scam artists share lists of the victims who they succeed in fooling. This is why I think we can't ever trust those who fell for COVID again. I don't quite get the connection between those two parts.
Well, I think I kind of do. I'm not sure how much truth there is in this. It seems to me that people who fall for cons, yes, that would be a valuable list for other con artists to be able to access, but also if you're a con artist, why would you
why would you
burn such a valuable asset?
Yeah.
I think the implication of the question, I'm not sure whether I buy it or not, is that if these people have signaled that they are, that upon discovering a Trojan horse that they will open the gates of the city, that they are going to be utilized against us again. Maybe.
They're going to be utilized against us again. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, so maybe the first part doesn't even, it's not necessary here because we can all see. And we have talked about, to what degree was there either intentional in advance or used once it was happening, now we know. Now we know that this set of people will fall into lockstep quickly, and this set of people requires a little bit more coercion, and this set of people requires a couple of lines of evidence, and this set of people aren't swayed by Hollywood, but they are swayed by the CDC and the WHO. There's information there for sure.
But this is, I think I wish I had said this 2 hours ago. This is part of why it is important that we not balkanize social media. To the extent that people who got this wrong now go to their own sites where they get to rationalize in isolation, they're going to get it wrong and they're going to remain dangerous. To the extent that we all come to some kind of natural conclusion about what happened, how many people were fooled, what sorts of things fooled them, then the point is we all get safer. Because, the right thing is for us to immunize ourselves from great resetters who are unelected and have decided to remake our world without our consent. Right? How we make ourselves immune from pharma, which has a game in which it would like to medicate us with things that always have side effects and, that may not be effective. How to immunize us from public health megalomaniacs who would institute a campaign that might stick us permanently with a virus that maybe could have been eliminated, right? All of these things are really important, and if we break into separate conversations, then the point is, what do you think the chances are that the people who got this wrong are going to find their way to clarity? I'd say that's real close to zero.
Yeah. Okay. 2 last quick questions, and then we'll stop.
All right.
WC, which I think here means World Cup. Is the World Cup in Qatar right now?
I believe so.
Okay. World Cup in Qatar. How do I cope with the corruption that is ruining the sport I love? I don't actually know what's happening in soccer that is described here as the corruption ruining the sport that this person loves.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
I did briefly take an interest in the corruption surrounding the Olympics, which was jaw-dropping. Basically that there's a cabal of wealthy, influential people who decide, for example, where the games will be held, and because there's such a huge amount of resource riding on where the games are held, this is a thoroughly corrupt process. I don't know. I would assume the same thing is in soccer at a smaller scale. What effect it has on actual play, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd be curious to know what the corruption is doing.
Yeah. Okay, I know I said just 2 more, but one more in the style of suggestions for possible people to interact with. Now that Sargon of Akkad is back on Twitter, would love to see you two do an interview either on Dark Horse or Lotus Eaters or both.
Yep, I think it would be cool.
He has a real name. I've forgotten it.
Carl Benjamin.
Carl Benjamin, that's right. Yes. Finally, love the Armadillo painting. Is it possible for me to acquire one? Love you both. It's actually a mosaic. It's a bunch of ceramic tiles made by a ceramicist in Cuenca in Ecuador.
A famous ceramicist.
Famous ceramicist in Cuenca. We went to his studio and gallery and bought this there and bought some other awesomeness from him as well. I have a soft spot for ceramics, and when it combines biology with ceramics, I mean, how can you go wrong? And probably if I'd seen this question earlier, I would have checked, and I'm sure the artist's name is on the back there. But if you Google up ceramicist and Cuenca, Cuenca, Ecuador,
yep,
you will find this.
I believe I've been to the site, and I believe you could certainly get something of the sort. You might, he is famous enough that he produces multiples of things.
Yeah, it's one of these people now. He's doing production work, so this is actually came out of his gallery, but it was probably he designed the original, but it was probably actually made by
an underling of some sort.
Underling potters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually Cuenca's a cool town.
Yeah, it is.
If you ever get the chance to go to Cuenca, you can go on a tour of his studio, and you can there's big glass windows. You can look down on how these things are made. Anyway, yeah, it's a cool thing.
Yeah, it's very cool. So I think we all went. Some of our students went as well, but I knew I was going to be excited by it because I've been a ceramicist. But everyone who I think went, whether or not they had any past experience with clay and glaze and such or not, was intrigued.
Yep.
Oh, I'm stuck. All right. I think that's it.
That's it?
I think that's it.
We've arrived.
We've arrived. We will be... Zach's making faces. He's doing face palm over there. We will be back here at 9:45 Pacific time tomorrow. We're actually going to start. We're going to do a full hour, but only an hour. We're going to stop on the hour. What we're calling just a holiday gift episode of Dark Horse. And then after that, and that's going to be available publicly. And then after that, we're going to do our private Q&A on Patreon with a bunch of questions that have already been asked, but it's a lot of fun and we get to interact with the audience on those. So that's at 11 a.m. tomorrow Pacific. You can access the link for that shortly at my Patreon. And regardless, if you're on my Patreon or not, you can join us both at the live stream tomorrow at 9:45. Anything else to say before we sign off?
I think we've done it.
I think we've done it. Well, until next time, be good to the ones you love, eat good food, and get outside.
Be well, everyone.